The bread was gone before the sun came up. Not stolen, not wasted. Adais Ndukwe had given it away at 6:47 in the morning to a man sitting against the concrete wall of the transformer housing on Obafemi Awolowo Road in the cantonments district of Accra. His feet bare and cracked at the heel, his left eye swollen half shut, a plastic bag between his knees with nothing in it but a toothbrush and a folded piece of newspaper. She had been carrying the bread in a brown paper sleeve she'd gotten from the bakery on Spintex Road. One small Binse loaf she had bought the day before for 14 cedis and kept for this morning because there was nothing else in the flat. She set it on the wall beside him. He looked up at her. She did not wait for a response. She turned and walked the remaining 7 blocks to the bus stop on Kanda Highway, with nothing in her stomach but water from the tap and the particular kind of quiet that settles into a person who has made a decision they cannot take back. She had not eaten properly in 4 days, but that is not the part that matters here. What matters is who was watching from the window of the silver Land Cruiser parked across the road with the engine off. She had no way of knowing, and the man in that vehicle had no way of knowing, not yet, who she was or what she carried or what the next 72 hours would cost him the moment he found out. Adaese Nkechi Nukwe was 48 years old and weighed 54 kilograms, which was 9 kilograms less than she had weighed the year before, and 14 less than the year before that. She had stopped weighing herself in the clinic on Liberation Road after the nurse wrote down the 3rd number and looked at her with that particular expression that is not pity, but is adjacent to it. Aluka Dice had spent her entire adult life refusing to invite. She was 1.63 meters tall. Her hands, when she held them out flat, were the hands of a woman who had worked with them since the age of 11. The knuckles slightly raised, the skin at the base of each finger just beginning to thicken. She kept her nails trimmed to the quick and her palms clean. She smelled faintly of black soap and the particular dryness of air-dried cotton. Laundry hung on a line, not tumbled soft. She wore a navy blue dress with a thin white stripe at the collar, bought from the stall behind Makola Market for 25 cedis 3 years ago. The dress had been washed so many times that the stripe had gone from white to the pale gray of old typing paper, but the fabric still held its shape, and she still pressed it every morning with the iron she had inherited from her mother when her mother moved into her cousin's house in Kumasi in 2021. She had been carrying a black handbag, faux leather, the stitching at the right handle coming loose at one end, that had belonged to her Auntie Comfort, who had owned a small provision shop near Labone Junction for 29 years before her knees gave out. Adese had been given the bag after the shop closed. She kept inside it a folded yellow handkerchief, a small tin of shea butter sealed with tape, her national identity card, a Nokia phone with a cracked screen she had been meaning to get replaced for 6 months, and a sealed envelope she had not opened in 11 days. The envelope had the logo of GIPC, the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, on the upper left corner. She had not opened it because the last 2 letters from that office had delivered refusals, and she had given herself until this Friday before she allowed herself to read a 3rd. She was trying to register a business, not a large one. A catering operation, West African cuisine, prepared and delivered to corporate canteens, government offices, and private events, that she had been attempting to formalize for 3 years through a combination of forms, fees, phone calls, and one in-person meeting that had cost her 80 cedis in transport and produced nothing but a referral to a different department on a different floor. She was very good at cooking. This was not a self-assessment. It was a documented fact in the way that certain things become documented facts through repetition. She had cooked for funerals, for naming ceremonies, for weddings in the cantonments and the East Legon estates. For 2 embassy events, she had been referred to through a woman at her church who worked with a diplomatic household. At one of those embassy events, a man who ran the canteen operations for a private hospital in Hatso had asked for her number and called 3 days later asking whether she could cook for a staff function of 200. She had. They had paid her 3,400 cedis. Then the program coordinator had left the hospital. The new coordinator had a cousin who ran a catering company. Adaise had not been called again. She had been keeping records of all of it. Every job, every amount paid, every referral, in a brown notebook she kept in the drawer beside her bed, written in the small, precise hand of a woman who has always known that memory is unreliable and that the only defense against a world that does not remember you is to write everything down yourself. She had no employees. She had a gas burner, two large aluminum pots, a set of wooden spoons her mother had packed for her the last time she visited, and a network of phone numbers she had assembled over 11 years of doing this work informally, without registration, without a business name, without anything that the government would recognize as real. That was the problem. Contracts above a certain value required a registered entity. Events planners, at the corporate level, would not hire an individual with no certificate. One hotel coordinator in airport residential had told her not unkindly that she was operating in a space that required documentation. Get the papers, the woman had said, pressing the business card of an SSINE office into her hand. Then come back. She had been trying to get the papers for 3 years. The bus she boarded at 7:14 on Kanda Highway was heading toward the GIPC office on Gamal Abdul Nasser Avenue, where she had an appointment at 9 a.m. to follow up on a query she had submitted 8 weeks before regarding a license classification error on her previous application. She had the original documents in a manila envelope in the handbag, behind the unopened letter. She had gotten on the bus on an empty stomach, with 12 cedis in her purse, and arrived at the GIPC building at 8:43, which gave her 17 minutes, which she spent sitting on the low wall near the entrance, rereading the query letter she had written by hand and typed at the business center near her flat for 3 cedis. The officer she had been referred to was named Mr. Asante Boamponsem. It had a round face and a white short-sleeved shirt, and a name tag on a lanyard that had his photo on it from what appeared to be a significantly younger period of his life. He spoke without looking up from his computer for most of the appointment, which lasted 9 minutes. He told her that the license classification had indeed been an error on her part. The form she had submitted listed her operation under food processing when it should have been listed under food services. The distinction mattered for the fee structure. She had already paid the fee for food processing. The food services fee was different. He slid a printed fee schedule across the desk toward her. She picked it up, she read it, she set it back down. She asked how long a resubmission would take to process. A side 6 to 8 weeks, provided there were no further issues. She asked whether the fee she had already paid could be applied to the new category. Aside, that was a question for the finance office on the second floor. The finance office on the second floor had a queue of 11 people and a sign on the window that said the officer would return at 2 p.m. She sat in a plastic chair and waited. The woman who took the seat beside her at 10:30 was perhaps 70 years old, possibly older, with a face organized into a deep and complicated stillness that Adais associated with women who had seen too much to be surprised by any of it. She wore a kaba in dark green, printed with small gold diamonds, and she smelled of lavender and the kind of talcum powder that comes in a round tin. Her shoes were flat and brown and polished. She did not have a phone in her hands. She was simply sitting, watching the room, and when Adais caught her eye, the woman did not look away or give the brief polite smile of strangers who have been seen. She looked directly and said in a voice that was lower than expected, "You have been here since morning?" Adais sighed she had. The woman said, "What are you trying to do?" Adais told her. She did not tell the short version. She told it the way she told it to herself when she was alone. All 3 years of it. The forms and the fees, and the 2 refusals and the error that was her error, and the 6 to 8 weeks and the finance office that was closed until 2 o'clock. She told it without bitterness, because she had used all of the bitterness up sometime in the second year, and what was left was simply the facts. The woman listened the way very few people listen, without preparing her response, while Adès was still talking. When Adès finished, the woman was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What is your name?" Adès told her. "And you have all your documents?" She did. The woman nodded. Once, slowly. "I want to ask you something first," she said. "This morning, on Obafemi Awolowo Road, the bread you gave to the man at the transformer house. Why did you give it? You have nothing." Adais looked at her. The finance office on the second floor was beginning to fill. A baby somewhere behind them had begun the low, escalating sound of a complaint. "How do you know about that?" she asked. The woman said simply, "I was watching. If this story is sitting in your chest, the way I think it is, stay close. What happens in the next few minutes changes the entire direction of what follows. The woman's name was Pauline Owusu Boateng. She was 71 years old. She had been a secondary school teacher for 22 years, then a school principal for 9, and then, after her husband died, she had spent the last 14 years as the administrative director of a private foundation that funded small business development in Greater Accra, particularly for women in the food, textile, and crafts sectors. The foundation was called the Abena Awusu Foundation, named for her daughter, who had died at age 31 from a pregnancy complication at Korlebu Teaching Hospital. The complication had been manageable. The delay in treatment had not been. She did not explain any of this immediately. What she said was, "Come." She stood and walked toward the window of the finance office. Not the end of the queue, but the side of the window where a small door was set into the partition, and she knocked on it twice. A young man opened it. He began to say that the officer would be back at 2 o'clock. He stopped when he saw who was speaking. Adais could not hear what Pauline said. She saw the young man's posture change, the small shift from indifference to attention that happens when a person recognizes that they are in the presence of someone whose name they know. He nodded. Ed disappeared. He returned 3 minutes later with a woman in a blouse who sat down at the window and looked at Adais with the expression of someone ready to be useful. The fee question was resolved in 11 minutes. Yes, the prior payment could be transferred to the correct category with a letter of request which the finance officer printed and stamped on the spot. The resubmission with the correct classification was now possible today, not 6 to 8 weeks from today. Today, they went back to the ground floor. Adaese had the documents. She had always had the documents. She had the query letter and the original forms, and the fee receipt and the national ID and 3 years of records in a brown notebook that she had brought with her because she brought it everywhere, because the records were the evidence that she was real. She submitted the corrected application at 11:47 a.m. She was given a reference number and told that provisional approval would come within 5 business days, not 6 to 8 weeks, because the application was being processed through an expedited pathway for small enterprises connected with approved development foundations. She stood outside the building at 12:03 p.m. and did not know what to do with her hands. Pauline was beside her. She said, "Now, tell me about your food." They walked to a small canteen on a side road behind the building and sat across a table covered with a yellow plastic tablecloth that had been wiped recently and was still faintly damp. Pauline ordered rice and stew and a malt drink without looking at the menu. Adaise ordered tea, and Pauline looked at her and added rice and stew to the order before Adaise could redirect it. The food came in 8 minutes on orange plastic plates. Adaise told her about the catering work, all of it. The embassy events, the hospital staff function, the 200 people, the 3,400 Sadies, the lost contract. She took out the brown notebook and opened it to the first entry, November 4th, 2013, and set it on the table. Pauline picked it up and read. She turned pages slowly. She read for several minutes without speaking. Her face, during this, did not change. She set the notebook down. She said, "This food, your jaff, your contomire, your soups, have you ever cooked for a board?" Adaise said she had cooked for a board dinner once, for an NGO in Airport Residential. 12 people. She had served contomire stew and fried tilapia and kelewele, and they had eaten everything. Pauline sighed. The foundation holds its annual board dinner in 6 weeks. 31 people. The firm that has been cooking for it for the past 4 years. Their head cook is leaving the country, they told us last week. She picked up her malt drink. "Can you do 31 people?" "I have done 200, Adaise said. Pauline set the drink down. "Good." She reached into her own bag, a proper leather one, dark brown, with gold fittings, and produced a business card. She set it on the yellow tablecloth. "Call my assistant tomorrow morning. She will send you the date, the menu brief, and the logistics. The fee is what the prior firm charged. I expect it will be acceptable." Adaise looked at the card. She looked at Pauline. "Why?" she said. Pauline was quiet for a moment. The canteen was filling with lunchtime workers from the offices nearby. Somewhere outside, a trotro honked twice. "My daughter wanted to start a food business," Pauline said. "She had a notebook like yours, 3 years of records. She never got to use them. She folded her hands on the table. You gave your last bread to a man who had less than you. And then you came here and sat in a chair and waited, and did not complain, and did not give up. I have been coming to this building for 11 years. I have watched a great many people. She looked at Ades directly. You have what she had. Ades did not speak. She pressed the business card to the center of her chest, the way she pressed the coins her children had given her when they were small. Carefully, as though the object were precious and breakable. Call tomorrow, Pauline said. Bring your notebook. Ades called at 8:15 the next morning. The assistant's name was Dede. She emailed a document by 9 o'clock that included the event date, 5 weeks and 4 days away, a menu framework of 8 dishes, a list of dietary requirements for 3 of the 31 guests, the venue address in East Legon, and the figure the prior catering firm had charged, 18,500 cedis for the full service, including ingredients, labor, and setup. Ades sat at the small table in her flat and read the figure 3 times. She opened the yellow handkerchief she kept in the handbag. She removed the envelope from GIPC. She opened it. She read the letter. It was not a refusal. It was a conditional notice of approval from the prior application, superseded now by the corrected submission. But the language in the letter used her name and used the word enterprise, and used the word qualified in a sentence that named a specific classification she had spent 3 years trying to correctly occupy. She set the letter down on the table. She set the business card from Pauline beside it. She set the brown notebook beside that. Then she went to the kitchen, turned on the gas burner, set water to boil, and began to write a supply list in the margins of the notebook, because there was no other paper on the table. In the 6 weeks that followed, Adais and Duque cooked for the board of the Abena Owusu Foundation, 21 people in a garden venue in East Legon, with white tablecloths and 3 ceiling fans, and candles in glass jars, and served contomire stew. Hojof rice cooked with goat and 2 types of pepper she sourced from the market in Medina. Fried tilapia kelewele with ginger so precise, the chairman of the board asked who had made it. Waki with shito, and fried plantain. Anda soup she had developed herself over 12 years that she had never been able to name because it was a combination of her mother's recipe and her aunt's recipe, and 1 ingredient she had added. The year her husband left and she had needed something to cook that required total attention. Pauline ate 2 portions of the soup and did not speak for several minutes after the second one. The provisional business registration came through on a Wednesday, 4 days after the dinner. The business name Adais had chosen 3 years ago, Nuduque Catering and Events, appeared on the certificate in bold text above a watermarked logo of the Ghana Revenue Authority. She framed it in a frame she bought from a stall near the Accra Mall for 30 cedis, and she hung it on the wall of the flat between the window and the kitchen door. By the following March, she had 4 corporate clients: the foundation, a law firm in Airport City, a private clinic in Adabraka, and a technology office in the cantonments that had 80 staff and ordered lunch catering 3 times a week. She had 1 part-time assistant, a young woman named Efwa, who was studying nutrition at the University of Ghana and had found Ades through a referral from Dede. She had replaced the 2 aluminum pots with 6. The gas burner was still the same one. She had not seen the man from the transformer wall again, but she had passed that corner on a Tuesday morning in November, walking to a supplier on Obafemi Awolowo Road, and she had left a paper bag on the wall with 3 small bread loaves and a container of groundnut soup. Not because she expected anything, not because she was certain he would return, because she had learned, not as a lesson, but as a fact about how her life worked, that what she gave away was never actually gone. There is a thing people do to those they consider finished. They decide, on the basis of what they can see, the coat, the bag, the cracked phone screen, the coins on the counter, that this person's story has already been told, and that they already know the ending. Dexter and Gerald and Boampunson, and the coordinator at the hotel and airport residential, they all looked at Ades and Duque and saw a category. They saw a woman whose time had not come. They were not wrong about the coat, or the bag, or the coins. They were wrong about the ending. What they did not see was the brown notebook. 11 years of records, written in precise small hand, by a person who knew that the only defense against a world that does not remember you is to write everything down yourself. You cannot remove what a person has recorded. You cannot reclassify the accumulation of 11 years of work. You cannot close the finance office on the floor of a woman who has already been waiting since morning and will wait until 2 o'clock and then until 5 o'clock if that is what it takes. And you cannot predict who is watching from a car parked across the road. You cannot know which piece of bread, the one you gave away on the worst morning of the year, the one you couldn't afford to lose, becomes the first link in a chain that leads to a registration certificate on a wall in cantonments and a dinner for 31 people. And a soup so carefully built that someone stops speaking after the second bowl. Some people look at what they are holding and see what they cannot afford to give. Some people look at the same thing and see what they cannot afford to keep. That difference, that very specific difference in how a person looks at their last piece, is not something that can be taught or installed or transferred. It is something a person either carries or doesn't. Ades carried it. She had been carrying it since she was 11 years old, with flour on her hands in her mother's kitchen in Kumasi. The GIPC had no category for it, no form, no fee schedule. No officer on any floor of any government building could have processed it or classified it or told her what it was worth. The world found out. If this story landed somewhere real for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you know a woman like Adaeze, or if you are one, leave that in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.